to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
All right, friends, today we have a very special guest on the podcast, and she is someone who has been here not once, but also 2 times. This is her 3rd time on the show, which is, I don't think we've had anyone here 3 times. So very excited to have you back. Libby Ward is here with me today. She is a creator, a speaker, and a fierce advocate for women and mothers. Her work has been featured on the BBC, Good Morning America. She's also a member of Reese Witherspoon's inaugural Hello Sunshine Collective. She's known for her honesty and humor. Libby connects with millions of women through her social media platforms and creates spaces where moms feel seen and empowered to reclaim their time and well-being. Her brand new book, which we're going to talk about today, is Honest Motherhood: On Losing My Mind and Finding Myself, and it explores the realities of modern motherhood and her healing journey to become a more present parent and a whole person. So I just finished reading your book. I feel like I've already cried several times today. I finished reading the last chapter this morning.
So sorry.
So we're starting this interview just like in a bit of a fragile state for me, but I'm just so excited and honored to be interviewing you about your book that I have watched you write tirelessly for the last 3 years. Like, I just have to tell everyone, like, I think I've been there since the beginning, like since you got the deal to now. 3 years ago, I remember us like sitting, working on this book, and now we're finally here. So just from the bottom of my heart, I'm so excited for you and couldn't be happier to be interviewing you about your book.
Thank you. And 3 times, it feels like a little bit of a privilege to have that honor. It feels so surreal. I got literally the hardcover in my hands just yesterday, and I was like, I have to bring that to my interview with Jess, because it feels so real to think that I was just this curled up mom in a mom bun on my couch, writing in all these different positions in my house for 3 years, thinking it's never going to come out, and now it's here and it's real, and I'm so grateful to be here and talk about it.
Oh my goodness, so excited. So I have the advanced copy, so I'm going to show the camera here, but you should show your like actual hard copy. We both have a little moment there. It's real. Like, seeing the hard copy, I feel emotional for you because I'm still in the, I'm writing in the corners of my life, my book. So just seeing it in real life, like, wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. So today we're going to talk about the stories in your book. And a lot of these stories are ones that you haven't shared. People haven't heard these from you before. And I've known you really well. I've known you for a long time, but like reading this book, I think it just a deeper level, deeper appreciation for all the things that you've been through. And so much of it was things that, even though our stories and our upbringing and our backgrounds are different, I could relate to on the level of just being a mom and having a tough time postpartum myself. So I'm really excited for you to share, and for the mom listening who might be feeling really alone and struggling, or, a lot of my friends now are aged, like I feel like we're all done having kids, so we're reflective on that period of our lives. And man, when you reflect back, you're like, that was tough. Like, that was hard to go through those things. So one of the earliest stories in your book is the baby parade story. And I remember when the day you told me that you were writing this story and how excited you were about it. But can you tell us a little bit, what is a baby parade and why does this matter so much at the beginning of your book?
So just to clear the air, nobody called it a baby parade except for me.
It was a perfect description.
I coined the phrase baby parade, and I was quite proud of myself the day that I figured out that's what we're going to call it, because that's exactly what it felt like. So if I can paint a picture of what it was like when I was considering motherhood, pregnant, the very early days of becoming a mom. I was 25 years old, and I was attending a small town rural church where most of the mothers there, they were stay-at-home moms. They homeschooled their children. They maybe had farms. They had a lot of children, and it was very normal at our church for families to have a lot of kids, and motherhood was really put up on this pedestal of it is the pinnacle of life for a woman to be able to have children and become a mother, and it's celebrated and it's encouraged and it's really valued, it seemed. So our church is a small town church, and there is an aisle right down the middle like most churches have, and the pastor would stand at the front of the church, and when a new family would arrive with a baby, he would announce it from the front of the church, there's a new baby here, and he would usually say when it had been born, and then everyone would clap and cheer like, oh my goodness, you're here, it's a new baby, and there was especially a lot of excitement if they were there very quickly after having the baby. It was this whole like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just had a baby. It's a fresh one. We're all excited.
It's a fresh one.
And so the family would take the baby and like carry it up and down the aisle, like down to the front, up to the back, around both sides so everyone could see the baby, and we would all like ooh and ah over the baby because like who doesn't like to see a brand new baby? It'd be so exciting. And I just remember not only loving this ritual, I guess you could call it, but really feeling like this was a representation of what it would be like to be a mom. That when you have a baby, not only will you be celebrated, but you'll be valued and you'll be cared for, and people will check in on you. Like I remember when I was pregnant, people checked in on me all the time. They wanted to know how my health was, how my mental health was, how's the nursery coming along, all these different pieces. And the women at my church seemed to really enjoy motherhood and didn't really share a lot of the negative aspects of it. And I saw the way they interacted with their children, and I wanted to be like them. I thought, that's the kind of mom I want to be like. I want to be patient. I want to have my crap together. I want to have matching outfits. I want to have a cute new baby. Look at, everyone's going to celebrate you. It's going to feel so good, and it's going to be so good, and it's going to be so enjoyable. And so that really like set this precedent for what I thought motherhood was going to be like. And being 25 years old, I was considered old for not having started a family yet in the place where I was. I know for a lot of people, they say, oh, that's young, but my circle of influence all had children really young. And so it just seemed like the natural thing to do. And I was so excited to become a mom. And I really liked being around those women because they were so different to the mother that I grew up with as well. And so I really did put them on a pedestal too, of like, I want to be patient and calm and perfect and selfless, just like you. And it's going to be great because everyone loves motherhood and everyone loves mothers. And hooray. So that was very different to what my reality ended up being, but that's how I entered motherhood.
Yeah, I think so many people can relate to that, whether it's, someone at church or someone who you just know and you're like, this is a good mother. So I'm going to be just like that, right? I think especially for you when you didn't grow up, and we'll talk about that later, with the mom that you looked up to, who you're like, I want to be like that. Right. So you had this picture of these moms at the church, and I can just picture it. I also, became a mom around the same age. And so I can just picture what it must have felt like to go and be like, they've got it all together. And that's exactly how I want to be. Meanwhile, we don't know if they had it all together, or they probably also had a lot of struggles going on. Yeah. But it's the image that we have in our heads. And I remember the same thing of like being pregnant with my first child, and everyone's like, oh, just wait, Jess. Like, oh, she's going to be so precious, and like checking in on you while you're pregnant. And then you have the baby.
Right. Once they put the baby on your chest, nothing else will matter, and you'll do anything for your baby, and you'll love them immediately, and you'll just know what to do. I remember being so afraid that I wouldn't know what to do. And they were like, you'll be fine. Like, you'll just know exactly what to do. It's like a mother's instinct.
Yeah. And now on the other side of it, like my kids are all older, it's like I can kind of understand sometimes, because when I look at a person about to have their first baby, sometimes you can look at it through nostalgia, right? And through like, oh, I miss those years. I miss those times. And we can have those rose-colored glasses on, and we want new moms to be excited and not like scared of becoming a mom. And we hope and pray in our like hearts that it's not as hard for them as it was for us. But when we never share like, hey, you will know what to do, and, trust yourself and all these things, but also it might be really hard, and we don't share that, you go into motherhood thinking, well, why am I the only one that this is so hard for, right?
And we all have different circles of influence too. And as I look back at that time, I really had lived a pretty sheltered life up until then. And I didn't have access to a lot of different people who had different ways of thinking or being or mothering or living in the world. And because I didn't have the home life that I wanted, I really latched on to that church community. And they were so loving and kind and generous to me in many ways. But it also meant that I didn't have any other frame of reference. And so I only looked at them as my frame of reference. And I think every mom in the world has a circle of influence and a frame of reference. And it's different for all of us. But if you're anything like me, you look at yourself through the lens of the people you're most connected to. And that's where it can get kind of difficult. It doesn't mean that anyone has any ill intentions and not telling you the hard parts, but they also don't know who else you have access to or what else you're learning from different places in your life. They're just being who they are. And it's not till much later that I realized how much I had framed my own experience through the lens of my circle of influence.
Yeah. That makes total sense. I remember similarly, but for me, I was the first of all my friends to have a kid. So I didn't really have too many people to compare to, except for the fact that I was the only one struggling, the only one with a kid, and I wanted to keep up with the life that my friends were leading, right? And I was definitely the mom who was like, having a baby's not going to change my life. Like, we're still going to go out. We're still going to go for dinner. We're still going to do this, right? Yeah. And so we're still going to a friend's house and everyone else is there and we're going home at 11 o'clock and the baby falls asleep in the car and then she's wide awake when we get home. And I'm like, I thought people just like transferred their babies into bed.
Thought we could just do this.
Like, why are you awake right now? And now you're awake for 3 hours. And my friends are all sleeping through the night, like in their own beds without kids. And so I think you're right. Like our circle of influence has such a big impact on who we are and the shame that we carry and the things that we keep private because we don't want anyone to see us as like different. Yeah. So let's kind of move forward in your story. So we start with this baby parade, this idea that motherhood's going to be beautiful and glamorous and matching Zara outfits and everything's going to be perfect. Now there's another story a little bit later in your book. And here you are a mom and you call this story your breaking point or the moment where you realized, hey, maybe it's not all sunshine and rainbows and things are kind of tricky. Can you kind of walk us through that story?
Yeah. So when I had my firstborn, we went through difficulties. It wasn't easy peasy lemon squeezy, but she ended up being a baby who slept and who breastfed for 15 months. And I took my desire to be just like the moms in my circle and used that to try and be all of them at one time. And I made homemade food. And my first baby didn't have sugar till she was over a year old. And she didn't have any screen time. And, you know, I would clean the house with her in a wrap and she'd be breastfeeding while I was cleaning the house while muffins were in the oven. And I just handled it. And I didn't necessarily have the support system that I thought I was going to have, but it actually just fueled this desire to give more and be more and spin more plates and prove to myself in the world that I could handle it and I could be a normal mom. I could be like the other moms. And I felt pretty good about myself for doing that. And, you know, I'd spent a lifetime being good and achieving and doing what I thought everybody else wanted me to do and trying to be what everybody else was so that I could feel like I was enough and I was doing enough and I was good. And then eventually that I was a good mom. And that felt pretty great in hindsight. And then when my secondborn came along, who didn't eat, who wouldn't breastfeed, who then wouldn't take a bottle, who wasn't eating enough and then was losing weight, and I was being gaslit by anybody who I tried to get help from, and he wouldn't sleep because he was hungry, and then because he wouldn't sleep, he just cried so much of the day. He was such a sensitive baby, and I then was also having a toddler at the same time. While I had a supportive partner, my husband Greg, he's a police officer, so he was working day and night shifts. When he's not working a night shift, he's usually sleeping, and so while he was present and an active parent when he was awake and home, I was still the default parent. I was still carrying all of the things, all of the mental labor, all the invisible labor, all of the trying to soothe my baby when I couldn't and feeling like a failure. And because I am insane, right after I had him, we made the decision to move from one town to another. And the thought was, well, things aren't really working out here, out in the middle of nowhere. Greg works in the city. We want to move closer and we want to move before the kids are in school. So let's start looking for places now. And we just happened to find a place when I was a couple weeks postpartum and I made the decision to say, yes, let's move in 3 months. And so I moved with a 3-month-old. You know, I did, all the packing, all the everything to get ready for it while not sleeping, having anxiety attacks every time I was needing to feed my baby and just being a basket case. And I also decided that I would continue to run the Shoebox Project, which was a charity organization that helps women who are unhoused or at risk of being unhoused during the holiday season. And what we do is we collect new gifts and put them in shoeboxes and then deliver them to shelters and things like that. And so I coordinated the one for my whole community. I was a person who I wanted to help everyone. I wanted to save everyone. I wanted to do everything. I wanted to show everyone that I was different than the mom I was raised with, that I was just like the moms at church, that I could handle everything, that I could do it all, and I could do it with a smile, and I could handle it. And I just kept going thinking, tomorrow it'll get easier, tomorrow it'll get easier. And so I'm running this volunteer organization. We just moved. I have a baby who won't eat, who won't sleep, and I am just continuing to try my best to do it all. My mother-in-law comes to visit from England, and I clean the house and try and make it look perfect. continue to go to church in the matching outfits. And there was a shoebox packing project event that I had planned for while my mother-in-law was there. And silly me thought, oh, I know what I'll do for my me time when I have support here. I will go run a volunteer event because that's what I perceived as my me time. And so I went and we packed these shoe boxes, and you have to wrap the lid and the bottom separately so that they can be inspected before they get delivered. And so we did that. We had, hundreds of boxes. The back of my SUV was full of them. I was exhausted by the end of the night and realizing maybe this wasn't the best use of my me time.
Not really relaxing, but okay.
Really.
Yeah.
And it was just beginning to come to the forefront of my brain that maybe, possibly, these are not normal, realistic things for a postpartum mother of 2 children with no support system to be doing with her time.
Yeah.
And so I open the back of the trunk when I get home. It's near midnight. It's like freezing out. There's like icy water on the ground, and a bunch of the boxes just fall out onto the ground, and the contents just break all over the place. I'm by myself because everyone's inside sleeping, and I bend down to pick things up and put them back in the shoebox, and I just break down and I realize I am the shoebox. Like, I have been out here trying to have this shiny facade, this nice wrapping paper, this look it, I can handle it, I can do it all. And inside, I'm actually broken. I am all the content of this shoebox that are broken on the ground. I don't know how to put myself back together. And I just had this moment where I was like, what is the point in looking like you've got your stuff together? What is the point in having the shiny facade if you just feel broken inside? And that was, I would say, the first moment that I realized and I was honest with myself about the fact that I wasn't okay and that I couldn't do it all.
Yeah, and I think about, so much of this from my lens as a perinatal therapist and from my training in perinatal therapy, which is like, I remember I was at this perinatal, which is like postpartum pregnancy mental health training. This is like years ago. And I remember them saying, you know what a postpartum mom loves to do? And everyone's like, what? Move. And we all laughed because it's so true. Like, not just you, I do the same thing. My clients, I don't know, something about this season. We're 2 months postpartum. Let's move.
And
That's
why not?
A great idea. And I just remember all the therapists were cracking up because everyone's literally exactly postpartum moms love to move. I think it's the season of life. There's often change. We often need a bigger place. But for some reason, we always do it. And it almost always doesn't go great for the postpartum mom, right? Because you already have so much change, so many things going on. And then moving, just it's another layer. It's another transition. It's tough. So that came to mind for me when you were talking and when I read it. And then the other thing is just the overfunctioning. And I think when we think about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, what we often think about is the mom who can't do anything, right? Who's on the couch crying. I can't get up. I'm shutting down. But what we don't talk about is the mom who's overcompensating. And that was your journey, right? So if I looked at you, just probably a lot of the moms at your church, you're doing everything and you show up Sunday morning and everything looks perfect, cute kids, everyone's matching, but that is your way of just trying to keep up this appearance that I've got it all together, but eventually we can't do that anymore.
And the limited capacity you have as a postpartum mom, you're then using to keep up the facade, the energy that goes into, okay, do we have matching outfits? The energy that goes into those extra things to wrap the shoebox, right? To not just keep the content safe, but to actually wrap it and make it look like you have it all together. Is I later in my journey realized how much of my limited time and energy I put into those things and just how unnecessary they were. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know another way. I entered motherhood thinking that I wanted to be selfless because I was raised in a household where I often felt like I wasn't prioritized. And at times I thought my mom is actually selfish. And, we can talk about the healing I've come to later with that. But, I entered with this idea that I don't want to be selfish. And so the only other option is selfless and self-denial and self-sacrifice and people-pleasing and doing everything and trying to be everyone rather than what do I want, what do I need, but what does everybody else say that I should do, and then just try and do that without any acknowledgement of what my actual capacity is. Yeah. And when I read about postpartum depression, it was this image of this mom who can't get off the couch or out of bed and is eating bonbons and neglecting her children or just can't do anything. And I was kind of the opposite of that. I was doing everything, but internally, I was breaking down, and it took me a long time to really be honest about the fact that I wasn't okay.
Yeah, and that this wasn't working anymore, right? Yeah, I think that's just so good to know because a lot of parents will think like, well, I don't fit the mold for depression or for anxiety because I do care for my kids and I am showing. And that's often how it looks. It's like we're giving everything for our children, but then there's nothing left at the end of the day for us. I can definitely resonate with that experience as well. And I remember just for me, my breaking point came much earlier. It was with my first child. Like that's when I really had this moment and I remember it like so clearly. I write about it in my book. But in this moment, I remember I was at the mall with my mom and she came and like hugged the baby and was talking about how cute the baby was and everything like that. And I was just like a month postpartum or maybe like 7 weeks postpartum or something like that. And I remember feeling like, and not that she was trying to do this, but just feeling like a ghost. Like I'm not here anymore. I don't even know who I am. Like everything's about the baby because, everything's about you and you're pregnant and then you have a baby and like
immediately
it's just about the baby and that like, okay, understandable. Like you said, babies are cute and scrumptious and everyone loves them. And then I remember walking around the mall and my mom's like, you should really get some clothes that, fit you. Because I pretty much, after having the baby, only wore like Scott's gym shorts every day and like his shirts that were like, I remember being so mad at him one time. So I'm like, I thought like wives, like if I wore my husband's clothes, they should be like, big on me, but they're like tight and I don't like that because I'm tall and, I'm like, I thought your clothes are supposed to be like big and cozy, but they're like tight on me and I'm not. Anyway, so I remember we were walking around the mall and my mom's like, oh, Jess, like, what about something stretchy? And, I tried something on. Okay, bigger, bigger, bigger. Mm-hmm. It's like your body doesn't feel like your own. Nothing feels like it. It's like milk leaking everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then saying goodbye to my mom in that parking lot that day and her being like, are you okay? And for me being the first time, like, no, like I'm really not. Mm-hmm. And just feeling like I remember seeing myself in the like reflection of like our Pontiac Vibe vehicle, right? And being like, I don't know who that person is. And so I could resonate with so much of like your writing when you're kind of talking about that, like losing yourself, which is literally your like on losing my mind and finding myself. That's your subtitle for the book. It just brought back those feelings to me of like, man, new motherhood is tough. And like, I didn't have a single person who I knew at that time who had said, Jess, you might feel like a ghost. So tell me a little bit about the shoebox to the point where you knew you had to be honest with more than just yourself.
So with my shoebox breakdown, I, a few months later, started going to therapy. And I really didn't want to go to therapy. I'd spent my whole life trying to be a person who didn't need therapy because I, thought crazy people go to therapy. I don't need that. So it was very hard for me to make that decision and ask for help. But I did under the premise within my own mind that I was going there just to get help with my postpartum depression so that she could help me start to enjoy life again and not be filled with anger and resentment and rage, and so that I could just get back to being a person who could spin all the plates again. Like that's what I wanted. I wanted to not feel full of rage and resentment and get back to being Libby who could do it all and keep everybody happy and be a great mom. Like, is that so much to ask? Right. And so I thought, we'll just deal with that, check it off the list and move on with our life. And the reality was just very different. Going to therapy helped me with my postpartum depression. And there were little moments where I was able to make change or I was able to do things for myself, or I learned the word boundaries for the first time in my life. And my therapist helped me realize that maybe my overfunctioning and taking care of my parents and everybody else in my life might not be the healthiest. But I continued to do as much as I could still. And over time, it became less about postpartum depression and more about me being a person who couldn't stop overfunctioning and being hypervigilant and trying to do everything. And, you then have 2 kids, they're getting older, their needs increase. And I went from having a child who wouldn't eat or sleep to having a child who wouldn't eat very well still, wouldn't sleep very well, and now could not speak. And my son was in a lot of speech therapy for a long time, and I was the one that had to coordinate all that. I was the one that was carrying the mental load, who was doing the therapy sessions. I was still caring for my mother and driving her different places and helping her with things. And, I let go of the shoebox project, but I found other things to help with and other ways to fill my time. And I was working part-time, and I was the default parent at home and the load was just so heavy. So even though I was trying to take care of myself, I was trying to prioritize myself, I was trying to set boundaries, none of it was sticking. I would either fall back on my boundaries, I couldn't stop trying to do everything. And my son, who couldn't speak, was dysregulated a lot. I mean, any toddler is dysregulated, right? Any young child is dysregulated a lot. And so I have, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old who both are children who become dysregulated, but then one who can't even speak what they're frustrated about. And the energy it took to try and understand him, to try and teach him sign was so much. And I was constantly dysregulated, just filled with this internal rage that I stifled still. Like I would try to get it out in different ways, but I just didn't have the time. It was just me and the kids so much of the time. I didn't have a support system. I didn't have people around to come and take the kids every Thursday or every Sunday, or to go to a family dinner every Sunday and like let the kids play with their cousins. It was like me and the kids. And I should say, like, I have a brother and a sister-in-law, and we would see them and we had loved ones, like we had people who loved us. But the monotony of the day to day to day to day, the moment to moment, crying again, like no matter what I did, somebody was always upset and I was constantly giving and didn't have the ability to feel like I could handle it. And so there was a particular day when, Greg had worked overnight. He was sleeping in the morning. It was a school day. I had to drop off my daughter at school and my son at daycare. And we woke up late. And I think my daughter peed the bed or something like that. Just like that typical morning. We've all had them, right? Like the morning is just chaos.
Relate.
Like you're trying to get out the door. You're trying to okay, do we have the things we need? Have I brushed my hair? Have you eaten? Have you done the things? And then my son starts crying. I pick him up to try and see what he needs. He can't figure it out. He slaps me in the face. I don't slap him in the face, but I feel essential rage, like this internal rage. And I'm trying to get my daughter dressed and neither of them are eating their breakfast. And then, we're late. And so we have to get out the door. So I hand them both a granola bar. I'm like, please just eat these granola bars while I drive you to school. And I realized our babysitter couldn't come. So then I had to find somebody. And so we got in the car and I say, just give mommy a few minutes of quiet while I call the babysitter. And so I dial. And of course, my son starts crying because he needs something, because that is what happened all day, every day. And it was this moment of what now? I am trying to do everything. What could possibly be wrong now? But I can't look in the rearview mirror to see if he's signing because I don't want to drive into oncoming traffic and I can't understand the sounds he's making. And it was just this bubbling moment of he's crying and then my daughter's yelling to try and get my attention and kicking my seat like, mommy, mommy. And I just hit my limit. And I slammed on the brakes and I turned around and I screamed in their faces, shut up, I'm trying my best, you never listen, all the things that the phrases you keep in your head that you maybe don't say.
Your inside voice
The
came
inside
out.
voice,
Yeah.
I just let it all out. And I should say that I had never heard the term gentle parenting. I had never heard the term cycle breaker. It was, I don't know what year it was, but it was pre all of the internet stuff. What I did know from the moment I decided to become a mother is that I didn't want to be a mom who ruled by fear. And that I didn't want my children to feel unsafe at home, and that my main job was to make them feel safe and to make them feel secure and to make them know that no matter what, I would be the one to love and protect them no matter what. And until that moment, even though I had made mistakes, I had been snippy, it hadn't been perfect, I had, walked around my house filled with resentment and internal rage, I hadn't let it out in the way that I had promised myself I never would.
This was your first time.
And some people might say oh my goodness, you made it nearly 5 years, or, I yell at my kids every day. It's not about that. It's not a competition.
How long you made
it's
it.
not a competition.
Yeah.
I was still walking around my house with seething rage. I was still dissociated. I was still not present. Looking back, I wasn't attuned. I was just in survival mode doing the things. And so it's not a competition, but that is a moment that I remember because I just let all of it out. And I just remember looking in their faces and seeing them fear me. And that was the first time I'd ever seen my children fear me. And it broke me because I thought, I've spent 5 years being the person that nurtures you and that loves you and that calms your fears and is your safe place. And then to not just not do that, but to be the source of your fear was the last thing I ever wanted to be. Yeah. And it's just a moment that I will never forget, and that I knew something needed to change in that moment. And my son held up his granola bar, all crinkled, still in its wrapper, and he signed open to me because I was looking at him, and I opened his granola bar and I handed it back to him, and I dropped them off at daycare and school, and I apologized to them and, told them that it wasn't their fault and that no one should treat them this way. And I don't know what they understood, but I knew that I had messed up. And sent them to school and just broke down. And that was the moment that I knew this isn't just about being depressed. This isn't just about postpartum depression or being overwhelmed. You didn't yell at your kids because they deserved it. There's something else going on here that is making you someone who can't slow down enough to be present and see reality for what it is. It's making you someone who takes on so much that they have no capacity to deal with the natural stressors of having kids, of kids being kids, and to meet their needs in the way they need to. You're not able to do that because you can't regulate yourself. You can't calm yourself down. And I knew that while it was the first time I let it out in that way, that it had been something that I had felt inside for a long time, and that had been affecting me and my kids for a long time. And that's when I decided I really need to get real help. And that's when I really dove into the work of healing and finding who am I really, and why did I become the way I became, and why am I like this, and how do I fix it?
Man, that story, I got just goosebumps the whole time that you're telling it. And even though I've heard it before or read it in your book, it just every time just gives me goosebumps. And I think it's just something, whether it's one instance like that, whether it's multiple instances, but so many parents can relate to that moment that it's like, this isn't working for me anymore. And I think that's what makes you also such a good parent, is that you're able to say, I don't want to keep living like this, and then make the steps to change, right? And that is, you say you don't know what cycle breaking was at the time, but that is what it is to be a cycle breaker. Is, just for the parent listening, it's not about being perfect and never losing your cool at your kids. It's about sometimes you lose your cool a whole bunch of times, and then you say to yourself, look, this isn't who I want to be. And the real beautiful cycle breaking work is, and I'm going to do something to try and change that. And I think for me, I've had various moments in my life where I need to be like, okay, Jess, why are you being short with your kids over and over? Why are you losing your cool? Why are you anxious all the time? Why, multiple breaking points. And sometimes it's not just one, often it, and you talk about that in the book too, right?
Yeah. I had a great deal of them, I did just want to say, that was the breaking moment. But the finding myself piece came when I started to learn about what attachment and authenticity really was.
Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy. And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurtured First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurtured First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it. Yeah, let's talk about that. That was one of our things we really wanted to talk about, a topic we both love. So I'll give a little therapist perspective, then I'm going to ask your question. And I love, you talked about Gabor Mate in your book, and he gave you a beautiful testimonial in the back of your book, which is amazing. We love Gabor Mate here. And some of his work is just, and we've talked actually about this lots on the podcast for people who listen all the time, but is this balance between authenticity and attachment, right? So attachment is the relationship that we have with someone. We are going to want relationship, that we're wired to want belonging. I like to switch it to like authenticity versus belonging. Everybody wants to belong. But sometimes to feel like we belong within ourselves, we feel like we have to not be honest or not be authentic in order to belong, right? So if we go back all the way to the baby parade story, right? It probably felt in your heart that in order to belong with this group of moms, I can't be authentic and talk about the real things I'm facing, right? And people have that in so many different aspects of their life, whether it's like with their own parents, right? Whether it's with a religious group, with their friends. And the fear is always, if I'm honest, if I'm authentic, then will I no longer belong? And if I don't believe I'm still going to belong, I will choose belonging over and over. Yeah. Right? But then that's what's happening with you. You're choosing belonging. But at a certain point, that breaks us down because we also can't really live without being authentic, without mentally struggling, right? So to live well, we also have to be authentic. So tell me about that journey and understanding that. And then how do you even go from, where you are, just kind of trying to be this perfect mom to being able to start to be honest and authentic? Like, how does that come through, whether it's therapy or in your life?
Well, it was a really long journey that had a lot of starts and stops. I realized once I started learning about what authenticity was and the need for attachment / belonging / I also say connection, right? I realized that from a very young age, I was someone who self-sacrificed, who put my needs on the back burner, who wanted to save everybody else. In order to stay safe in the household that I grew up, I needed to prioritize the feelings of my parents, of my mom. In order to feel regulated, I had to regulate her emotions. I had to walk into rooms scanning to figure out, what do I need to do? What do I need to say to make sure that this is a safe place to be? What can I do in order to keep the people in this room happy? Because if I keep the people in this room happy, it makes me feel safe. And it makes me feel like I have some semblance of control. And it took a long time to realize that I didn't just become a person who martyred herself and ignored her needs and didn't listen to herself and didn't even acknowledge her own feelings by accident. I didn't just do it because I was a good person. I didn't just do it because I was a caring person who just wanted to help everyone and I was better and I was good and, oh, my childhood made me stronger and so now I can do everything. I actually became a person who prioritized everybody else's needs over my own and who couldn't even see my own needs and capacity and reality as a maladaptive coping mechanism from my childhood. And so I never really found out who I was. So the book is, the subtitle is On Losing My Mind and Finding Myself. And a lot of people say they lost themselves in motherhood. But I realized in doing this work that I didn't lose myself in motherhood like some people did. I actually never really had the opportunity to find myself because I was always focusing on what everybody else needed and I didn't feel safe enough and I didn't feel like I belonged enough anywhere that I could relax and ask myself, who am I? What do I want? What do I need? Are my needs even important? I just got my worth from being what everybody else wanted me to be. And I went through life on autopilot doing that. And it wasn't till motherhood forced me to look at it and to say, you actually can't do everything. So what is it that you're going to let go of? What is it that you do want? What are your priorities? What are your needs? It wasn't until there was so much spinning on the plates that I was forced to go, wait, I don't even know who I am. Why have I been trying to make all this food from scratch that I don't want to make from scratch? Why am I cleaning my house to this degree when it actually doesn't matter to me if I dust? Why am I trying to make my kids wear matching outfits if I don't care that much about that? And I realized there was so many things I did in motherhood because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, because I thought that's how often I was supposed to clean my fridge, or I thought that's how I was supposed to dress my children, or that I shouldn't have time for myself. There's so many things I did because I just looked to everybody else instead of looking at what I actually needed. And I tell a story in the book about how, so I lived in England when I was 21, got married really young to my husband, Greg, who we're still married. Yay! Early marriage worked out. But he lived in England in a city called Southampton, which is in the middle at the bottom on the coast of the English Channel. And that's where the Titanic left from. And there was a day we went to go look at like the port where the Titanic left from. There was a cruise ship and I looked up at it and I was like, that's amazing. And just imagine the Titanic. And I talk about this in the book where I realized that I had been acting like the Titanic my whole life. Like that I had taken my difficult childhood experiences and put them into convincing myself I had enough grit and that I could just work hard and push my way through, and that I had more capacity than I did, and that I couldn't break because I was just strong and I could do it. And the reality was that I wasn't invincible and that I did have limitations. And I realized that I, like the captain of the Titanic who did not listen, the ship ended up sinking. And so I realized that I actually needed to pay attention. And that was, in reading books about trauma and reflecting on that time. And I just had this moment where I was like, I need to actually pay attention to who I am and what I want and what I need. Otherwise, I am going to sink my own ship and take my kids down with me. These kids that, like, it's my job to raise, and it's my job to raise well. I cannot raise them well if my needs aren't met. And I can't meet my needs if I don't know what my needs are. And I can't know what my needs are unless I actually stop and listen to what they are. Mm-hmm. But that's really hard when you've spent your whole life not listening to your own needs.
Absolutely.
And so it was a long process of just stopping and moment by moment, day by day, going, okay, what is my capacity? What do I need? What is my real circumstances? The real circumstances are that I don't have the family support that I thought I was going to have, that my child has extra needs, that I have a husband who's not there as much, that I have my own trauma that makes me someone who's more dysregulated, who makes me this way. And so how can I adjust my expectations based on my reality and not what I think everybody else wants, because I'm the only one living my reality. And so that set me on a path to finally listening to myself and listening to the red flags of my body and going, what do I need to change and let go of so that I can be the mom I want to be? And eventually that led to me going, oh, I haven't just been dishonest with myself. I've been dishonest with everybody else. Who is the real me? And how do I show up as her? Because you can't lower your expectations and stop being a people pleaser without it affecting
everybody,
the people that you've been spending your whole life to please.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's just so much in what you said, so many things we could unpack. But I think one of the things I just want to say for the person listening who's like, that's me, because like, how many women is that, right? And sometimes motherhood has this way of making us look at these things, right? Like we have to look at, well, who am I? Especially as your kids get older and you're like, well, I want to model to them, this and this, but like, I can't do that unless I know who I am, right? And I think it's important for you and for everyone listening who was in your shoes of the people pleasing and all these things to know that probably served you for a time. Like you had to do it to get out of your childhood, to be safe, right? And I think that's what a lot of people miss is like, don't be mad at yourself for people pleasing for so long and for like, doing that, because for a time that is what kept you safe and okay, especially when you've had a traumatic childhood. But then there comes a point where it's like, now I can't do that anymore. Yeah. And when you can't do that anymore, and when people rely on your people pleasing in order for their own comfort and emotional feelings of safety, because you never disagree with them or whatever it is, it does rupture things. And it can turn your whole life upside down in ways. And you do talk about that a little bit in the book as well. And I'm wondering if you want to talk about, what being authentic, kind of the cost of authenticity and how that kind of evolved to finding real friends and real community. Yeah.
Well, I will say the way I went about it wasn't ideal, in that at the same time that I was figuring out who I was and what mattered to me, and I was lowering my expectations of myself as a mom, and I was learning to say no and learning to hold my boundaries a little bit more and opening my mind to different worldviews and, really having a fire lit under my butt at the same time about the social issues that make motherhood so hard and the real issues that affect mothers everywhere. As I was changing personally and setting boundaries and, not hosting the Christmas dinner or not saying yes to, whatever it is I used to say yes to, or not volunteering to be the person who does all the things, I'm not just dealing with those little disappointments and it happens, where when you start saying no, when you're a person who changes, it doesn't just affect you, it changes everybody. And it's kind of like a dance, right? Like you stop doing the thing you've always done. It's like, okay, people don't really know how to respond. Like, do they call you out on it? Do they ask about it? Do they back away? Does it sort of rupture things? And so that was quite difficult as a person who her whole life has used doing what she thinks everybody else wants to belong. When you stop doing that and you start to feel distance, that like triggers that like very primal fear of like, oh my goodness, see, this is why we do what we think people want, because then things will break and then we'll be alone and then we'll be unsafe and then we'll be alone forever. And so that was hard. But I, at the same time, found TikTok in 2020. And, it was this weird space and time where I wasn't seeing the real people in my real life, the people who I hadn't really been honest with about who I was and what I believed and, my boundaries and so many different things about my life and who I was. And I had been figuring out who that was, and I didn't feel comfortable sharing it with them. And I was, starting to get passionate about, different issues and about like being true to myself and not being a people pleaser, lowering my expectations as a mom. And then I decided to share it on the internet because I think, well, no one's going to find me on TikTok because millennials are not on TikTok, and it's this new platform and no one's going to find me. And obviously people did find me and I shared a great deal. And so it made it more complicated for me because I wasn't just changing in my personal life, I was changing in public. So that was difficult. And so between the changes I made in my personal life and also, me being this person in public, it did cause rupture in my relationships. And there were relationships that were broken, that were lost, that I'm still repairing, some that are now healthier than they were before. A lot of different changes happen, but it was really scary going through that transition to be like, on one hand, I feel like the truest version of myself I've ever been. I know who I am. I like who I am. I finally believe that I am a person who has worth, regardless of what I can do for others. I know my needs matter as much as my kids' needs matter. I know that I need to meet my needs in order to meet their needs, and that my well-being is essential to being the mom I want to be. And so I will make these decisions in order to be that person. I knew that, and I felt so strongly about that. And at the same time, it's really scary to be that person out loud and to deal with, the different ramifications of like how that changes your relationships and not being able to feel safe and wondering, have I made a grave mistake? Like, should I just go back to the way I used to be so that everything can feel safe and secure? But once you start, you realize, no, you can't, because when you finally figure out like who you are and you can be that person, you can't go back. And so then you just have to find a way forward to, how do I be true to myself and authentic while also being connected to other people at the same time? It doesn't have to be complete self-erasure, and it also doesn't have to be complete independence where you just cut everybody off and you're completely isolated. There has to be some sort of middle ground. And so it took time to like rebuild that. And the thing that kept me going all along is, at the end of the day, my kids need me to show up as whole, and I cannot show up as whole without meeting my needs.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that now that social media, TikTok, like there's just like everyone, I feel like, is like, set boundaries with your family, say what you need, but there's a way of doing that comes from this genuine place of like, look, I haven't been completely honest about who I am for multitudes of reasons. And a lot of women are like this because we're also conditioned to just be like nice and kind and like make sure you get along with everyone. And at the same time, that doesn't mean, you have to go cut everybody out of your life, right? And I remember my own therapist saying to me, like, think about, okay, what is the most honest thing I could say right now? And then think of like 3 different ways you could say it, and then choose the one you respect the most, that you're going to be most like proud of yourself for saying, right? And so it doesn't mean it has to come across in like a cruel way and like, but sometimes you can say the most honest thing that's going on for you in a respectful way, and people will be like, okay, well, that's not who I want to spend my time with or be associated with, and that is tough.
Yeah. And what I learned through all of it is that you can survive the discomfort of disappointing people. Yeah. I think for so long I believed this message that disappointing other people was unbearable and that I couldn't survive. It didn't even seem like an option to disappoint others because it just seemed like I wouldn't survive it. It would be unbearable. I would lose everyone and everything. And in losing people and in fracturing relationships and in practicing being honest, sometimes well and sometimes imperfectly, I taught myself that I can actually survive disappointing other people, and that the reward is that I get to be true to myself and a more regulated, present parent and person.
Oh, yeah, so true. So true. And when you start disappointing other people sometimes, like, that's really hard. And I remember like thinking though, like looking at my children and being like, but I can't disappoint them. And so if I say yes to this thing, that disappoints them, and like they can't be always at the butt of like all these
and
disappointments.
And that's something that really messed with my head, and that it eventually helped me to heal even more, because I started this journey to healing, this journey to figuring out who I am and being honest about who I am, because I wanted to be the best version of myself for my kids, and they were my reason for healing. And I think that's a really great reason. But later on in my journey, I realized, wait a second, why couldn't I have ever been my own reason? And for how many of us, for how many women and mothers do we say, well, I want to be the best version of myself for my kids. And it's true, we want to, and they are our reason. And at the same time, we don't even realize that in the same breath we're saying, I'm not worth it. My well-being and my wholeness is not worth the effort of disappointing other people. My ability to be regulated and present at the dinner table at Christmas is not worth me saying no to this thing. I don't matter. Only my kids matter. And for me, getting to a place where I realized, wait a second, I actually have mattered all along. And I should treat myself as though I matter and that I'm a human being with real needs simply because I am. And by doing that, of course, that will help me be a better mom. But I also deserve this. That is a part of my journey that took a long time to come to, and that I hope more women and mothers can come to, that yes, you can heal and become yourself and be honest about hard things for the sake of your kids, but also you deserve it because you're a human person too.
100%. And I think, my work as a therapist, I think the kids are often like the gateway in, right? They're like the first kind of like, okay, a mother might not do it for herself, but she'll do it for her kids because she loves her kids. She's a good mom. And then, like you said, like that can be the first reason. It's kind of like the entrance point. But then the deeper you get in the work that you're doing on yourself, you're like, well, yeah, exactly. Why don't I believe that I deserve to find wholeness and wellness and take care of myself? And that's often like a lot of deeper work and therapy, which you talk about that all. Like, I think people should really read the book if they're in that part of their journey. So can you bring us to kind of, as you're wrapping up the book, you talk about a friend, Abby. And I love how you talk about Abby. It starts with, how do you start it again? Something about like...
The first time I met Abby, she was nothing to write home about.
Yes, exactly. I loved it.
That was the opening line to the book. And I remember handing her this chapter being like, okay, hear me out. Don't be offended until you get to the end of the chapter, okay? Because it brings it home a bit. Because, I had broken relationships, lost relationships. So much of my life had changed in this journey to becoming myself that I was really feeling like, how do I be a person who is true to myself and connected to others at the same time? And my dad had just passed away, and I was just in like a season of grief and like, who am I and who are my people and how do I find them? Is it too late? Is it too late to find my people? I've lost these people that I clung to for so long, but can I find my people this late? And so Abby was new to our town, and she was introduced to me by a mutual friend, and I was very busy. I was like in a season of like rapid growth with my platforms, and there were so many things happening, and I wasn't necessarily looking for a new friend. And I was also feeling like, can I even trust my judgment of people also? Like, I have been attached to so many people who have hurt me over the years, because naturally when we have traumatic experiences, we sometimes can be more drawn to people who feel like they're easier to attach to quickly and who make us feel good and whatever. And so I had been feeling like, can I trust myself? I don't know if I have time, but she was new to town, and I thought, you know what, I'll just be friendly. And so she came over, and she was just a regular mom in her Lululemons and Blundstones and mom bun. And, we talked about how she was a teacher and how I used to be in EA. And it was sort of like, oh yeah, nice to meet you kind of thing. And she went home, and I kind of thought like, this is a nice girl, but it wasn't like exciting in any way. There was no like, oh my goodness, like new best friend, kind of just, all right, like that was nice. And so I thought, it'd be nice to see her around town or church or whatever, but it's fine. And then, we went to a few different mutual friend occasions, and I would run into her in town, and we exchanged numbers, and we would slowly text back and forth. And it wasn't anything exciting. We didn't go on any big trips or do any big nights out, but, we'd go to Walmart together or HomeSense together and stroll around and, just share different pieces of our lives. And I slowly began to get a bit closer with her. And I realized in time, when she became someone who was quite close to me, that there was a reason why she felt boring in the beginning and why it felt so good and so safe now. And it's because we went slow. And I think as a person who is more insecurely attached, and as a person who, is drawn to maybe more eccentric, exciting characters because they make me feel safer and they tell me what I want to hear and they're people pleasers and they say the things that make me feel connected, it actually felt unsafe at first. It felt like, well, you must not like me because you're not telling me all these nice things. Oh, you must not be whatever. And it was over time and slowly that this relationship was built, and it was learning and practicing like, oh, okay, can I be myself? Can she be herself? That it grew. And, there was a lot of instances where she's a very busy mom as well, where we'd make plans, she would cancel, I'd be like, that's okay. We'd make plans, I would cancel, she'd be like, that's okay. And I started to realize, wait, like I've had other relationships where they might make me feel guilty, or where I might get the silent treatment, or there might be different things, friends that were really exciting to be around, or, just different people in my life that kept me in this pattern of people pleasing where I would just like do whatever to make them feel better. And there was this weird thing with her where it's like I could just be who I was and she wouldn't judge me or make me feel bad, or I could cancel or make mistakes, and we could talk about things, and that relationship was really healing for me because of how it grew. And as I reflected on the other relationships in my life that have been safe and have been consistent and stable, they all started slow. And that helped me to realize that often the safest relationships are the ones that start slow, and it's okay for it to be that way and to give it time. And she ended up being, one of my very closest friends to this day.
I love that story so much. I think it's so true, like, especially for trauma survivors like yourself, you can be really drawn to these charismatic people who give you all the love and praise and attention, but then later they just leave you high and dry, and you're like, wait.
Which is your biggest fear.
And which is your biggest fear.
Your biggest fear is being left.
And then it confirms like, well, I am unlovable, so I better keep people pleasing, right? So this pattern. And I love that you talk about that like boring relationship, like the beginning, right? And I think about like all the people who are like my closest friends, and it's true. Like it's built like tiny moments over time where you can learn to trust each other. And, this idea of, I remember with one of my friends, like, I share something vulnerable with her, and like you see the kindness in her eyes, and she's like, I can handle it. And then she does something vulnerable to you. And it's that serve and return.
You
right?
see how they respond. Like it's those little moments where when I say this honest thing, do you shy away? Do you back away? How do you respond to the honest thing? And it's sort of like, allows you to know like, oh, am I safe to be my true self? Or do I feel like I need to keep that part away? And it's slowing down and listening and paying attention to that too. Like, how do I feel when I've shared this thing? Do I feel like I'm safe to continue to do that?
Yeah, it's so true. And like such an honor to have friendships like that. And I would dare say our friendship is like that as well.
And I'm very grateful for that.
Yes. Yeah. Slowly over time, developing the serve and return and being like, hey, like here's this really hard thing I'm going through. And you being like, okay, let's talk about it. Right. And same. And I think those are how the truest friendships happen. So can you take us then to the end of the book, to your Sunday dinner story, and just kind of tell us, where do we end? And just for people listening, it's not going to spoil the book for you. No. But I think it's also important to kind of end this episode in this way as well.
Yeah. So there is something that happened a few years ago where I was betrayed by a friend who had told me that they would never do this thing to betray me, and that I could trust them and I could rely on them, and that, no matter what, this thing wouldn't happen, and they wouldn't leave me, and they'd be honest with me if there was ever any struggles or conflict. And in the end, this person up and vanished overnight. And there was no closure. There was no real conversation. It left me with a very deep wound. My biggest fear of being abandoned came true, and it was someone I had trusted with a lot of my life. And it sent me into a really, really dark place of all those messages that I'd believed about myself, that I can't trust my own instincts, that I can't trust other people, that I shouldn't rely on other people, that I'm always going to be left alone. It's always just going to be me. And it hurt really badly. And it was at a time when, I think I was in the middle of writing the book. Like it was later in my journey. I had done a lot of healing, and I had a lot of secure relationships and had made a lot of progress. But that betrayal sort of felt like it sent me back to the start. Sent me back to like, what is the point in having done all this therapy? What is the point in having done all this work when I'm just going to be left alone anyway, and all my fears are going to come true? And I mean, it truly shattered me. And I went to my therapist and I said, I got mad at her. It was the first time I ever got mad at a therapist. I was like, when is it going to start working? Like, when is the therapy going to start working? When am I actually going to see changes in my life? Like, what is the point in doing all this and having hard conversations and paying attention to my needs and trying to be true to myself and trying to be the most real version of myself and doing my best if I'm just going to end up being hurt over and over again anyway, and I'm just going to go back to square one. And, she listened like therapists do and nodded along like therapists do and just sort of asked me, like, do you feel like you are back at the beginning? I don't remember how the rest of the session went, but I remember being annoyed that she asked me that.
How dare you?
Like, how dare you ask me that question? And so it did make me reflect. And it was later that week or that day that we had Abby and her husband and her kids come over for dinner. And so we had started this like Sunday dinner tradition whereby we had dinner every Sunday. And, when I was in my early years of motherhood, I remember just longing for Sunday dinners. Like Greg would be working every other weekend. I'd be on my own with the kids every other weekend and just struggling through. And all my friends would be busy. Even if they were free during the week, they were busy on the weekends with their families. And it just like cut me so deep that I didn't have that family belonging that they had or that safe place to land. And I just longed for Sunday dinners. So when Abby at some point in our relationship said, hey, like, why don't we do this as a regular thing? And we'd swap back and forth every other Sunday. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And so our Sunday dinner was coming up and I was a train wreck. So in the therapy session, I caught a glimpse of a Rubik's Cube that was in the sunroom in my session. And the history on the Rubik's Cube, if you read the book, you know that I opened the book with a metaphor about the Rubik's Cube that I wrote before this therapy session happened, like a year before my son I even ever got this Rubik's Cube, which is insane. So I see this Rubik's Cube, and the history is at the beginning of the book, I talk about how being a whole person and a good mother just feels impossible. It feels like you're trying to solve a rigged Rubik's Cube with the sun shining in your eyes and your fingers missing. It's very graphic detail there. I am known for that. And that's because that's what it feels like. It's like if you try to solve one thing and all these other problems happen. You meet your kid's needs, but then the other kid has a need, or you have a need, or you get to the dentist appointment, but not the other thing. And so it feels impossible. And I had spent all these years trying to figure it out. And I had thought I'd made so much progress and I wasn't, but I was. And it took my son buying a Rubik's Cube on a vacation for me to realize it. So it was about a month before this therapy session. I know I'm going all over the place with the timeline, but if you're following, a month before the therapy session, we're in France on a vacation, and my son uses the 50 euros of spending money we gave him for the whole 2 weeks to buy a Rubik's Cube. And I think, well, this is a disaster. Like, he's just going to cry and be upset. It's not going to be any good. But it wasn't. He ended up, watching tutorials and learning how to do it. And long story short, he ends up becoming a genius at the Rubik's Cube and solves it. But I learned that a Rubik's Cube is like trying to solve code. And you have to learn a set of steps in order to solve the Rubik's Cube. And every time there's a new scramble in the Rubik's Cube, you have to learn a new set of things to do. And you can't just watch a tutorial. You can't just learn about it. You have to actually practice doing it. You have to practice turning it. Oh, that's that problem. Oh, this worked last time. That's that problem. This worked last time. And you only get quicker at doing it when you practice. You have to keep practicing it. And it's a different things that you have to do each time. And so I was so fascinated by like how you end up learning to solve a Rubik's Cube and how I'll never be able to, but my son can. And so when I looked over at this Rubik's Cube in the therapy session, I realized that that's exactly what my life was as a mother and a person, that there's always going to be new problems. There's always going to be hardship in life, in motherhood. There's always going to be a new thing that you have to solve. And it might be different to the thing before. And it might feel like you're back at square one and that you just made one wrong turn and now the whole Rubik's Cube is effed up and you're not going to be able to fix it. But it's in the practicing, and for me, the practicing of being honest about my needs, about my kids' needs, about who I am, my priorities. It's in the practicing that you learn the steps you need to take in order to be true to yourself and whole again and fix it or solve it or whatever it is. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to get scrambled again. It just means that that's what life is. And so, yes, my heart was broken, but also I knew what I needed to do in order to heal it. Is I needed my friend to come over for Sunday dinner, and I needed to journal about it. And I needed to acknowledge that I was hurt, and I needed to face the truth about the situation, and I needed to look around at the other people in my life who helped me feel safe and lean on those relationships. And it made me realize it's not that this hard thing means that I'm broken or wrong or bad or stupid or it's always going to happen to me. It happened, and I actually do have the skills to figure it out. And how lucky am I to have a Rubik's Cube to solve in the first place? and how boring would it be without it. And in practicing my little Rubik's Cube of life and trying to be a good mom and a whole person at the same time, I've learned the skills that I need to keep making it through. Not to have a perfect life, not to be a perfect mom, or to be, scot-free and not having any issues, but I have the skills and I can do the hard thing and I will make it through whatever the next problem is.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful.
I took a long time to get there. I'm really sorry.
No, it's good. I have tears in my eyes. I remember when that all happened and just how awful the betrayal was, right? And I think knowing like you through all of that and being able to see it in the book and coming out the other side and being like, sometimes in life and motherhood and friendship, all the topics you cover, we think we can't get through and then we do.
Yeah. And the thing that the code in the Rubik's Cube for that issue in particular was actually leaning on other safe people, which was really this moment for me of, no, the solution to this betrayal is not to retreat. It's not to convince yourself you can't be trusted and other people can't be trusted and to just be on your own again. It's also not to chase after that person and beg for them to come back and apologize for things you didn't do wrong and erase yourself so that you can stay connected. The thing to do right now is to know what's true about yourself, to be true to yourself, and to lean on other people because we need other people and we need to stay connected. And that's what I want my kids to learn too. That they can trust their feelings, they can trust their instincts, they can be themselves, and they need other people. And if we learn the skills to find those safe people and lean into those relationships, like that's the money. That's the key.
That is the key. And I think that's where then, like in that moment where I remember you told Abby about that, you're saying that, you told me about that. Like I remember the day it happened, when you can have authenticity, like, hey, I'm going through this really shitty, terrible, awful thing. And someone says, okay, like I'll still be here for you. That's when you have your belonging too. And I think when we can have both those things, just to bring it back to the authenticity, the belonging, that's when we can feel whole as mothers, as women, as people. And I think that's really this core theme throughout your whole book, right? Is like, you can have all the belonging in the world, but if you're not honest, it doesn't fulfill that need. And you can have all the honesty in the world, but if you don't have anyone that you're attached to, that doesn't feel the need. So it's really both.
You need both.
And I think the whole Honest Motherhood book just does such a beautiful job of showing someone, through your own storytelling and humor. It's quite funny, the book too, like showing someone how both can exist at the same time. And so I think this book is just truly a gift to every woman and mother who out there who is on that journey, which I know is like, let's be honest, most of us.
We're all trying to figure it out.
We're all trying to figure it out. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Is there anything you want to share with our audience before we leave about the book, about where to find it?
I think I would just want anyone listening to know that if you are wanting to be more honest about who you are with the world, that you can survive whatever difficulties that brings, and that the reward on the other side is a more truer, whole version of yourself, that you're not alone, and that, you can do it. You can get the book, just about anywhere that you buy books. It's called Honest Motherhood, and that's
it'll be on Audible too.
It'll be on Audible. I am someone who has to listen to books. I can't read paper books, so Audible, Amazon, all the places. Find Libby everywhere and anywhere. And what a honor to have you back on. What a great discussion today. Teared up pretty much the whole episode, but there was no sobbing involved. But that's another thing is, sometimes that's another way through our hard things, right? We have to cry about it. Feel your feelings.
Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.